Well, today I am joined by the celebrated British composer Cecilia McDowall, and we are preparing in Halifax Camerata Singers to perform wonderful work, Night Flight. With cello, we'll be joined by Hilary Brown, and the program will take place at All Nations Church, and the program is called Exhale. It's sort of the end of our season. We began with Inhale, and we'll finish with Exhale. Cecilia McDowell, it is so wonderful to meet you. Welcome. And for those of our listeners who might not know your music well yet, I wonder if you would just introduce yourself and share a few words with us.
Well, greetings. It's lovely to meet you. Yes, I'm Cecilia McDowall. I'm a composer. I work in London, England, um, and I do write a lot of choral music, but I write orchestral music, chamber music. So really quite a broad spectrum of works. But I particularly love working with words, and choral music is a medium that I love.
Well, you've certainly you've been prolific, especially in the last 20 years or so. I mean, the catalog is extensive. You're a house composer, is that what it's called with Oxford
Uh,
University Press?
That's right. Yes, that's the term that Oxford University Press give it. I'm still waiting for the house, but
Oh, yes.
yeah, yes, right.
Well, it's certainly you're published by many other you have many other publishers as well. I understand you write quite a bit for the organ as
Yeah.
well. Do you have any works sort of on the go right now? Any choral works or otherwise that projects that you're working on?
I do. I'm writing one in particular, which is I'm finding it a very interesting one to do because it's a joint commission between a choir in Stockholm called the Gustav Vasa Choir and with a choir in England called the Exeter Philharmonic Choir. And the the way that I'm bringing it together is that it is about climate, it's about weather, and of course in Stockholm or in Sweden rather, Celsius, Anders Celsius, is well known for introducing the thermometer. And it also happens that in Exeter, the it is the home base of the Meteorological Society. So it's been a fortuitous bringing together of two aspects of weather. The piece is going to be called the Weather Book, and it focuses on different aspects of climate, and I'm finding it great fun to write. And it is. Sorry, I'm just sort of thinking a bit more about it. It is for primarily amateurs, but very good amateurs. So SSATB. There will be a soprano soloist, and it'll be with an orchestral accompaniment.
Fantastic. And do you know when that will be premiered?
Yes, it's going to be premiered in two halves. The first half is going to be in Stockholm on March the 23rd, and then the remaining part of the cantata will be performed in this country, England, in November or the autumn.
Wonderful. Well, we'll keep an eye out for that, certainly. And this is so wonderful because it seems, in a way, this will lead into the conversation about night flight. You have a wonderful way of reaching, connecting with stories of people and talking to something very specific, but also connecting with sort of a wider, broader topic. And many of your pieces have this way of reaching into the past, but also having such a relevance to today. So in Night Flight, we learn about this American aviator, Harriet Quimby, who very few people will have heard of before. So we'll get to her in a moment. Um, what inspires you, Cecilia, as a composer? Perhaps there are other composers whose music you find particularly inspiring, or what texts do you return to, that sort of thing.
Yes, I mean, it is always an interesting question, isn't it? Where do we get our inspiration from? Where's the starting point? And I think very often for me, the starting point is is to do with topicality, to do with the idea, and very often to do with the detail. Um, I I'm often inspired by events, by history, by art, by books, by uh, um, uh, things that are happening in the world. And what I find particularly interesting is to see whether I can find a theme that I can open up and focus on, and draw as much information from. I it's an interesting thing, isn't it? I suppose it's really quite broad. I mean, I have written an orchestral piece, for instance, that is directly related to a painting by Turner. Is Turner well known in Canada? And the painting is called Rain, Steam, and Speed, and it is literally about a rain. I mean, sorry, not a rain, a train crossing over a viaduct. And what interested me about that piece was the dichotomy between the train, which in the 1830s in this country was regarded as something really quite threatening and destructive of the landscape, but also set beside it in this painting is tranquility and a pastoral scene. So fundamentally, the piece is about a train, but it's interesting trying to convey the contrast between what has been and what is now. It's to do with invention and exploration, and I think too with um, pieces like the Requiem that I've written, the Da Vinci Requiem, um, and the references I've made to flight. I do find exploration and invention always inspiring. And just to take it a little bit further, I think if there's something that I'm ignorant about or I don't know much about, but I find interesting, I am always looking for ways of perhaps introducing it, perhaps to the listener, to the performer, that might be of interest as well. So sort of um, explore that particular idea.
I love that. And certainly the train and early aviation even, I mean, these are things which, as you say, open up possibilities. And in this on this continent, certainly in your country, the train in the 19th century represented a complete revolution.
Yes.
It was a complete change of the way of life. So with aviation and with, as you say, sort of your fascination with flight, there's this incredible sense of exploration, but it's so close to this idea of there's a danger, of course. There's a sense of urgency. There's a sense of drama
Mm.
in anything that has that sort of where the stakes are that high. And Camerata this season has explored several pieces about journeys, and especially we've looked heavenward. In November, we performed a work by the fantastic Canadian composer who's living in the United States now, Tawny Olson, and it
Yes.
was about the 1969 moon landing, and it depicts really this launch in one of the
Mm.
movements. But Tawny's writing is like yours, is so it depicts this very specific moment, but then it connects it to many ideas which are so relevant today. The space race, and sort of space exploration as it sort of was presented in the 1960s. Certainly, there are a lot of concerns today. There are a lot of
Yeah.
implications about how that exploration has sort of advanced, but also threatened various things. So that's why I find it so fascinating that there's sort of this dichotomy of the wonder and sort of that the danger perhaps of the unknown. Do you find that influences your writing when you explore
It,
these
it,
sorts of
it
stories?
yes, it does, because I feel it's all about balance, isn't it?
Mm.
About the pushing forward of boundaries, but at the same time not destroying as you go. Um, and there are so many instances, aren't there, where uh, industrialization and advancement can actually wipe out communities. On the other hand, it can do all sorts of things. Am I right in thinking that the train did extraordinary things, didn't it, between Canada and America in the 19th century, sort of opening up great possibilities. But yes, it's about balance, I think.
Absolutely. And as I referenced, Camerata has tried to strike a balance this season. We began in November with music that was meant to take your breath away. And so the idea was exhale as though you're sort of waiting for what the next moment might be or you're on the precipice. This program coming up, which will feature Night Flight, is called, or rather Inhale, sorry, was the November program. Exhale is sort of the balance of that program. We're partnering with the local branch of the Canadian Mental Health Association for this program. So connecting to the breath and the idea of finding sort of an awareness of self in a variety of ways. Will also be presented visually because we'll be joined by a movement artist, Meredith Kalaman. Now, the idea is we haven't begun our workshop yet on Night Flight, but the idea is that Meredith will dance to at least a portion of this work. The work, of course, features
Wonderful. Yes.
cello solo,
Mm.
and I find the cello to be just probably the most human of
Mm.
instruments, other than the human voice, in that we have this body of the instrument, which is so closely held and connected to the player, has the capacity of a vocal range that roughly encompasses the entire human vocal range, and yet can be so emotive at the sort of extreme register. There is a physicality which I really think will be also embodied by Meredith brings. And then, of course, there's the sense just that the choir is a body of singers, of course. There's sort of this idea that we could be a backdrop for those various things. As a conductor, my I'm silent, or I ought to be, but there's a sense of physicality that's presented there. So we're excited to see how this takes flight,
Yeah.
so to speak, specifically when we
Yeah.
are working with our guest artists.
It's absolutely lovely to hear what you say about the cello because my cello playing is rusty now, but I used to play the cello, and I think it's the most wonderful instrument because, as you say, the compass is extraordinary. And the thing that I think is so wonderful about the top range is its intensity. I mean, it's so intense and so beautiful. And I think the fact that you have that line mingling with the voices, it's just like another voice, but of a rather more searing quality. So I just love it. And I've actually written three other pieces that's for choir, a choral group, and cello solo. So yeah,
Yeah,
it's wonderful. Yes, yeah.
fabulous. I must have a little sidebar here and reference um, for my one of my doctoral recitals at Michigan State University. I did a whole program of repertoire for choir and cello, and there's just such a rich
Mm,
repertoire with that combination because, as you say, it's just so it's a perfect pairing. But there's one work in particular which, in the Canadian landscape, must be referenced, and it's a work by Jocelyn Morlock, who sadly passed a few years ago. But
right.
this is a setting of Exaudi for
Mm,
cello solo, eight-part
yeah.
chorus. Off-stage trio, and it depicts
Lovely.
the
Mm,
departure of the beloved, and the cellist is really the one left behind to mourn. And I must share that
yeah.
first of all, Camerata has recently performed this. Just it was my audition piece with the choir when I
Mm,
auditioned for this position a couple years ago. But I was a soon to be a new father when I had an opportunity to perform this piece. And as you see, the intensity of the high range,
Mm,
there was a moment with a high C from the cellist just in rehearsal, which was
yeah,
performed. Our cellist was a remarkable player, and he played that one note, and I something inside me
yeah,
broke, and I was brought to tears. It really does have this
yeah.
incredible intensity, as you
It
say.
it really does, doesn't it? It's piercing, but
Mm,
it's beautiful,
mm,
and quite heartbreaking
yeah,
in certain context. Yes, yes.
certainly.
What an amazing piece that is. I would love to know more about it.
Yeah, I
Yes.
will. I'll send you
Mm.
some information because I
Yes,
truly
do.
think it's
Yes,
it's one of
yeah.
the great. I think it's one
Mm.
of the great Canadian choral works of the
Right.
last few decades, honestly, and it's a yeah,
Yeah.
it's a beautiful work. So I wonder, Cecilia, could you share a bit about your composition process? Um, I'm not a composer. I'm an arranger, but I am a pianist first as my first instrument. I can imagine it's helpful to sit down perhaps at the piano. But do you begin with text, for example? What are some of those
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
steps?
Um. Right. So if it's a choral piece, I spend quite a lot of time looking for the text because I feel if I am completely at one with the text, I feel then I can do it a good service. Sometimes I commission the text, as for example, the piece that I mentioned earlier, the weather book. I've been working with Kate Wakeling, and she is so interesting, so responsive. She also studied music at Cambridge, so she's highly musical and understands so much about internal rhythm and rhyme and everything to do with the musicality of words. So it's both. It's looking for the text. It's sometimes commissioning the text. When I'm happy with the text, then yes, I spend a lot of time thinking about it in advance. Before I even write a note, I think about the structure. Um, that's before I even get to the piano. So once I have got the whole idea formulated in my mind, I then use manuscript paper, old-fashioned process, and I make sketches and I do quite a lot of writing on manuscript paper before I put it onto the computer. That way, I feel it gives me freedom to change, because I have this feeling that once it's on a computer, there is a terrible tendency to think, oh, that's fine, I'll use that, cut and paste, stick it somewhere else. But I prefer to manipulate things before it gets to that stage. I'm always grateful for the computer and putting it on that way because it does save time and it makes legibility possible. So, in terms of how I approach it, once I have got the idea, I've got text, I then work each day on this, and just basically just keep going until I've finished the piece. Um, I suppose I really sort of treat it a bit like office hours, and starting in the morning and just working through the day, taking a break, and then perhaps working again in the evening. Um, so it's just when I'm working on a piece, it's fairly intense. Um, yeah, so that's a rough idea.
Yeah, wonderful. You are you must be tremendously busy. You are in such high demand. You've got performances, coming up, premieres coming up, as you mentioned, the Weather Book, but I'm sure other performances. You must keep a very busy schedule, just trying to attend as many of these performances as possible.
If I can be present, I love it. It's quite interesting. I think I imagine many composers feel this, that because it's a solitary business, and a lot of the time you're just working on your own. Although, of course, I must say the joy of working with a poet is absolutely great, and I've worked with a number of poets over the years. and I find that very stimulating and very interesting. But then, of course, the actual essence of doing the writing is just sitting at home, getting on with it. So when there's an opportunity to work with a choir, I love it. I love meeting the choir. I love getting the feedback from the choir, because actually sometimes that's really helpful to have a sense of how it's coming across. I mean, is it, because I feel the most important thing for a composer, particularly with choral music, is that it communicates something.
Mm,
And if I feel that it can communicate to the performer, then the chances are it will communicate itself to the audience, to the
mm.
listener. So it is that sort of train of events. Um, so yes, yes, if possible, I love to be there. It's
Yeah,
not always
wonderful.
possible though.
Of course,
I
of
wish
course.
I wish I could be there in May. Yes,
Yes. Well,
yes.
have you been to Canada before?
I haven't. I do have relations in Canada. Um, yes.
Well, then we must see what we can do about that.
Oh, nice.
That's
Mm.
terrific. Um, you are a multifaceted musician. You've had a career as an educator and all of this. You're a keyboard player. You mentioned you've played the cello. Um, I wonder about sort of the musical motives that emerge in a work like Night Flight, where it's quite concise. These three movements are woven together. Each poem sort of tells a different facet. I think of this journey of Harriet Quimby. Um, on this May program, we are presenting three sets of three songs, essentially, among other works. A set of songs by Canadian composer Nancy Telfer, and that's the three songs of love and loneliness. And then the Trois Chansons Bretonnes by Hank Boddings,
Yeah.
and of course Night Flight. Each very, very different. But what I often find I get so drawn into in these concise works, and especially if there's a set of pieces, is that I love to explore these different musical motifs and how a composer uses a particular sonority. There's something that connects Night Flight, I believe, with the set of songs by Nancy Telfer. Actually, is the use of second inversion chords actually in some of the
Oh,
passages of your work, which is so compelling because it is a very specific kind of resonance. And so I just wonder, how
no,
do maybe some specific musical motives kind of emerge as you work through a piece?
that's a really interesting thing. I don't think anybody's ever said that to me before. But this the second inversion is a is a great place to be, I think, isn't it? Because anything is possible, and you can go off in any direction. I mean, it sort of opens things up. I think vocally as well, it's a nice piece of layering. That's yes, that's interesting. I haven't thought about it in a conscious way, but yeah,
There's something too, and I'm imposing here, I know, but we the Boddings, the set of three songs of Boddings, sort of in the mold of the Ravel and Debussy chanson, which by the term connects it to sort of a medieval form. Um, and so when I hear a second inversion, or especially sort of a series of second inversion chords in parallel or something, I hear organum, I hear something quite old sometimes, and so
mm,
there is a little bit that's an imposition perhaps, but in this writing, it's maybe not a connection to something very old because Harriet Quimby's life, sort of, and her flight, the flights at the early 20th century was not so long ago, but somehow, as you say, it is grounded in a way, but it also opens up uh, sort of a sound world of possibility. So let's maybe move
yeah,
to the story of Harriet
yeah.
Quimby, which Night Flight is sort of inspired by. Um, can you first tell us who was Harriet Quimby?
Harriet Quimby was an extraordinary woman. She was very talented. I think she I think she was a film actress. She wrote film scripts. I've got a feeling that she was she was really quite a star and extraordinary. Taking this flight across from Dover to Calais, and of course, what she did was she went in the opposite direction from Louis Blériot, who had um, crossed over the English Channel 3 years earlier in 1909 from Calais to Dover, and she did it in reverse, and she did it in the fog as well. Um, and her life was short because shortly after this, in 1912, I think it was in July, she was taking part in an aeronautical display in Boston, and something happened in the plane in which she was, which happened to be a Blériot plane, when she pitched forward and her passenger as well. The pair of them fell into the harbour. Um, and that was that. And of course, what I felt so much was reading about her, thinking nobody seems to have heard of her. And of course, as we know, the Titanic sank on the same night that she was doing the cross channel adventure.
Right.
So of course, her news was obliterated. And I think even in America, there's not very much known about her. I think there's a postage stamp in her honor, which doesn't really seem to be much, but I think she's in various museums somewhere, sort of
Yes.
reference. Um, but as a general concept, they're not really known about. So I thought she
Hmm.
was fascinating, and it also, in a very practical way, tied up with the fact that the commission I had was in 2012, and this was celebrating her centenary, 1912. And it happened too that the commissioning body was called Musique Entente. Hang on, let me get this right. Musique Cordiale, a wonderful festival based in the south of France. And of course, my mind was thinking, well, there's Entente Cordiale. Is there some way of presenting a commission that's got some connection between England and France?
Hmm.
And this seemed to me a lovely way of making that connection.
Oh, it's beautiful. I'm hearing uh, over and over from you this idea of making these sorts of connections and sort of the idea of not just connecting sort of subject matter, but connecting audiences in this way, prospective audiences and sort of commissioners. And that's it's
Yeah.
beautiful. It's so much a part, I think, of what choirs rely upon, and choirs are quite good at this. Certainly in this country, we're very fortunate to have a close-knit choral community, and so I understand this might be the Canadian premiere of this work, and I suspect if we do this right, if Camerata does this right, uh, we should get the word out, and I hope many other performances of the work follow. Um,
Yeah.
Now, the poetry for Night Flight is taken from Sheila Breyer. What can you tell us about the poet and what led you to these three poems?
Right. Well, Sheila Breyer is she's related to my husband's cousins. So that's yes. So in fact, when Music Cordial approached me, um, my husband's cousin was chairman of it, and he suggested his brother's his sister-in-law, and she has written a lot of absolutely beautiful poetry. She's very modest. She's doesn't. Uh, I don't know that she publishes her work in a very obvious way, but I felt this was very special because she was giving me an insight into poetry, which I, yes, I just felt everything about it fitted in beautifully with the whole concept of Harriet Quimby, quite by chance. And there's a spareness about her poetry and an intensity again in the meaning of the words. And I just felt it suited what I wanted to do just perfectly.
That's beautiful. Now, I I always enjoy these conversations with composers, and I find myself wanting to go down different sort of paths. Earlier, just to return, you mentioned Kate Wakeling, and the name I knew I had come across her name before, and I believe it's because the Canadian composer Sarah Cortell, who is I think also a
Well,
house
Sarah, yes, yes,
composer with
yes,
Oxford. I
yes.
believe she has set some of Kate Wakeling's
Right.
ticks.
Ah, yes, yes, yes. I'm sure she will have done. Yes,
So
yes.
I must
Yeah.
return to that. I know Sarah's a friend,
Mm.
and so I
And
must
and
anyway must
and
return to that
Kate
idea.
and
But
I, yeah. I mean, Kate and I have I think we've probably done about 4 or 5 things together now. And one of the other pieces, which is, I think it's going to be premiered in Colorado in April, is a piece called The Ice is Listening. And it is basically about the melting of ice,
oh wow,
and its rapid deterioration.
of course,
And it has a connection with England, with the frost fairs on the Thames River in London,
okay,
in the 17th century, when ice was plentiful.
yes,
And then it also, it's a bit of a lament about the melting of the ice, which is related to a scientist, who made the observation, that when, I can't remember what he said. I think it's when the ocean speaks, the ice listens,
mm,
and it really is about the diminishing of ice. And
mm,
also, there's another aspect of this particular piece, the ice is listening, um, in the Arctic. The glaciers are melting, and there is an interesting formation called moulin, as in Moulin Rouge, windmills, um, which is when fresh water pours across the top of glacier, and it pours and makes a sort of well into the glacier, which goes underneath the glacier and it melts it from underneath. Um, these are incredibly beautiful things, but terrifying in their way, and beautiful, intense blue. But of course, gradually they melt. And I can't remember the detail of this, but it may have been in 2014. There was a glacier that just became extinct in Iceland. And I think a poet wrote a sort of um, uh, tombstone, um, I don't know what to call it, for this, as a sort of, sorry, that's my post that's just come through the door, that was really just a requiem for
wow.
the ice. So yes, yes, Kate is full of good ideas and wonderful to work with. Yeah.
That's so fascinating to hear. And again, I can't help but return your connection to this sort of the historical, but the present day, the sort of relevance today. You seem to have a real passion for sort of the an ecological awareness. This is so timely. Of course, there are many composers in this country who are really uh, connecting with things
Mm,
related to the climate crisis. And a name I just have to
yeah.
drop here is Carmen Braden, who is a composer from the North
Yeah.
Subarctic in Canada, fabulous composer and who
Yeah.
does a lot of research around the sound of ice and the sound of sort of
Mm.
melting ice and writes wonderfully for choir. But anyway, there's a connection there as well. I
Well,
must follow
yeah,
up on. It's fascinating.
yeah, that's
Um, so to return to the poetry here, and maybe a little bit about the story. What are some of the different facets um, of the poetry of the life of Harry Quimby? As you say, poetry is it, it leaves space. It's not. It doesn't prescribe. And then this happened on the flight. It really just sort of evokes a mood. But we have three movements: New Moon, Crow Landing, and Before Dawn. What's the arc with these three movements?
yeah, that's such a good question. I feel that the arc is very much the journey in the first movement. I'll come back to that. The second movement is, to put it prosaically, the landing, and the third movement is the euphoria of
Mm,
having landed, the happiness, the joy of where you are. Um, and it was quite interesting. I mean, the opening lines I've forgotten. I just have a look at the text again. I think it is about balance again, and I was thinking that in a plane there is this element of getting the balance right. And actually, when you see videos of planes coming in, when the wind is great, you see some terrifying visual imagery, visual representation of planes just trying to steady themselves as they come in. So the first one, I mean, you mentioned very kindly the possibility of having movement to these, and I find that really exciting. I mean, I I love ballet. I used to play for the Royal Ballet classes here many years ago, and so could have a bit of an affinity with movements there. Um, and I think in terms of how it connects with movement, that there is this kind of rocking um, lack of um, uh, you know, certainty that something will make it. But towards the end of that movement, I hope that it then becomes much more still. There's probably a second inversion in there as well, um, and gives a sort of sense of broadening out and a stillness that comes into that movement. Um, and then in the second movement, the crow landing. I mean, I love the words in this because felt they were so visual, that there's a great sense of one force going against another force. So the effect of the crow trying to land in opposition to a wind force, I think, is quite a powerful image. Um, there's something awkward about it, bedraggled, blown around. Um, so there's a sort of unpredictability about it, and again uncertainty. So it's those two opposing forces which I found quite interesting. And then with the last one, I just felt it was a an opportunity for repose and savoring the moment. And I had great fun with the top C on heaven, which I always think is a very difficult word to sing. Heaven, how you sing that, what can
Right.
be one word or two syllables. Sorry, one syllable or two syllables. It's not easy,
Certainly.
especially up there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. Now, you do in fact finish the first movement on a second inversion, and you begin the second movement on a second inversion. uh, and so I love that that sense. And again, I'm drawn to that idea of um, uh, the risk that's involved. You talk about, the text says you can be thrown off balance. So it's not even just talking about, the assurance of finding balance. It's actually
Mm.
the the acknowledgement that this is a dangerous pursuit, which of course an early aviator would have been so familiar with that idea. And
Yeah.
the shakiness of a landing, particularly in what would have been a lightweight, uh, you know, um,
Yeah. Terribly
airplane, I'm sure,
lightweight. Yes.
through the wind, through in the fog, all of these things. It's remarkable. I'm so drawn to the way that the cello interacts with the voices as well. I'm sure it's not just one thing, but perhaps it is. Who is the cello, or what is the cello in these
Is the cello the
stories?
spirit of flight? I hadn't thought of that, about giving it some kind of um, persona, but I suppose it's the connecting line, isn't it? It's the pathway that goes right from the beginning right to the end, and is a kind of linear connection between all three movements, um, giving different character to it. It's quite ragged, isn't it, in the second movement? And of course, there's the fun of having the very last moments, the last bars of the second movement as a downward sliding glissando. So it just sort of disappears right downwards.
Right.
But there's also, I mean, the way in which the opening of it goes, it's quite sort of energetic and driving, um, running to get the choral element started with its very uneven balance, the change between 6/8 and 3/4 to try and give that kind of lopsided um, change, and then changing the that particular motive, which I suppose is a kind of ostinato between the different voices, so that there's a variety of texture through the movement.
Certainly.
Yeah.
No, that's that's fabulous. And again, connecting to some of your other wonderful um, compositional output. The Da Vinci Requiem. I mean, of course, we have perhaps the sense that flight, which you've returned to many times, that is this sort of
Yeah.
this it's this aspirational thing. There's maybe even this sense, and this is connecting to sort of the arc that Camerata has seen this year, that the idea when we've sung a few pieces about exploration, about flight, sorts of thing. It really is that there's a sense that, as you mentioned about the train, that
Mm.
it's this innovation, this movement into the sort of the future of what might be, and it's this idea that so long as we act responsibly, there could be a lot of good that can come of this, and the way it connects human beings and all this. And in Da
Mm.
Vinci, it was sort of this perhaps this obsession with what might be. Um, yeah, I don't know. Does that resonate at all, or
Yeah. I
that
mean,
sense of journey?
and it's been said so many times. I just think Da Vinci is just quite extraordinary. Everything you read about him, everything that he has achieved, is quite beyond anything else. What I find really quite amazing is that he didn't have the kind of education that so many of his peer group did, and I think he always maintained that he did everything through the eye. It was all about observation and just looking and responding in that way. But the fact that his mind could think up all so many things, like the tank, the helicopter, the flying, all even contact lenses. I think
Right, right.
he had something there. Um, and his collection of his notebooks are fascinating to read. I don't know whether this is written somewhere, that my parents had these notebooks when my parents got married. They had just been published in this country, and my mother gave them to my father, who my father was a professional flautist, but he was also a bit of a scientist as well. So he found the books really interesting. So those books, which I still have, um, were a great fascination. Just looking at the pictures, thinking, goodness, yeah, so great, yeah, extraordinary.
Wonderful. Well, in Night Flight, you've given us a wonderful glimpse into the pioneering and sort of heroic life of Harriet Quimby. This music will be featured on Camerata's May performance, which is titled Exhale. We will be collaborating with Hilary Brown, cellist, and Meredith Kalaman, movement artist. We are so delighted to be performing your work, Cecilia. And I wonder, just to finish our time off today, what do you hope audiences walk away with after hearing this piece?
Oh, that is a difficult question. I mean, I hope, well, first of all, I hope that they enjoy it. That's always a great plus. Um, if there's anything from the piece that might actually make somebody go and look something up and find a bit more information about it, that too is a thrill. That it because I always find if I go to a play or a talk, a lecture or something, and hear a little bit of information, sometimes I just like to go back and look it up and find out more about it. Um, and I think, I mean, if this doesn't sound too pretentious, I I often hope that the music will touch somebody.
Well, that's our primary task, I think, as interpreters, is to honor the music that's in front of us and to make that kind of connection. We certainly hope that we do your music justice, and we are so excited to be performing Night Flight this coming May. Cecilia McDowell, thank you so much for spending some time with me today, and we are excited to learn more and more about your music. So thank you for this wonderful work, Night Flight.
And thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.